So the first thing we're going to do is load categories. I think when we do that, we can then wire it up to our table view on our initial scene and begin seeing that data come in. So we want a function, it's going to be another static for loading categories. So I'll call this load categories. And then we can declare the body of this. So I'll get a reference to the managed object. That's going to be get managed object. And let's see, we want a C here. So let category 1, so the first category, and this is what the syntax is going to look like. Let ns entity description insert new object. For identity, scroll up here, we'll have categories. So that's the name of one of our entities. And then we'll have our managed object. So we'll have managed object here. And we'll need to cast this. So we're going to do a force unwrap categories is the type. So now we're making use of that class we created earlier, which you can see this one here. And as far as this force unwrapping, so much of Swift 2 now is force unwrapping. You hardly ever use optionals. So what I can do now, we're going to have 4 categories. I can go ahead, copy this, and then I'll just make a few changes for the other categories. So we'll have 2, 3, 4. So now I've got 4 constants that I can use to then load the actual data. So let's do load categories. And what we're going to do is category 1, category, we can make use of those attributes on the classes we created from the entities. So category name is going to equal president, or presidents with an S. Then we want an image name. So category 1, do we have an image name? We do. Is going to be just presidents. So we want to give this an ID as well. So the ID here is going to be 1. And now we have 3 attributes. And if we go back to our model and we look at categories, we have 3 attributes. So at this point, we can basically copy these 4 times. So 2, 3, 4. And I'm just going to sequentially number them. So we'll have a 2, 3, 4. And so for the second one, we'll do cities and just call this cities. And then we'll do skyscrapers. And we can just call this skyscrapers as well. And we'll do actors. And this would just be actors, like that. And finally, what we're going to do now is save all of this. So this is all the data that we're going to be using. And now we can go ahead and create a save for it. So we've loaded all this data up into these variables. Now it needs to be saved into our data model. So I'm going to do try managed object and call save. Then down here we might get an error. All I'm going to do in this case is just another simple print out the error. So error saving. Okay, so we need to do some changes here. So we'll have category 2, category 2. Right now everything is just category 1, and that will just override everything. So we're going to go ahead and 4, 4, and I think that fixes these warnings that we're seeing, and it does. All right, so we can try to test this out or start building up to a test. And what I want to do is declare a class level variable, and I'm going to declare a few of them. So I'll have selected category, and that is going to be an int, and then I'll have categories. That is going to be an array of categories. So I just initialize it to an empty array, and inside of our view did load, I can call the load function for this. All right, so categories, and what I'm going to do is get a reference here for the data. So core data manager, and then I'll do get data, and I'll pass the entity in. Actually, I won't get data. There we are. And this is going to be categories. I'll have to cast that as this kind of array. right there. And now what I'm going to do is we don't want to keep loading the data over and over. So we're going to try to get the data. And then if this variable is empty, we can go ahead and load. So I can do a count equals 0. Now we can go ahead and try to load up the data. So I'll have core data manager load categories. Oops. All right. And now we can fill this variable with that data. So back up here, I can copy this and assign it down here. And we should have data inside of our categories variable at that point. And while we're creating these class level variables, I want to go ahead and create a variable to this table view. And that way we can go ahead and get that out of the way because we will need that reference. So I'm going to bring up the assistant editor for this view controller. Actually, let's go back to the storyboard. This table view here, I'm going to open up the document editor to make sure I get the right reference that I'm looking for. So we'll have table view. See, could not insert outlet, could not find any information for the subclass named select category. Not sure what that means. Let's see. I'm going to try that again. Right here. Table view, strong, super quiz. So let's try that. All right. I'm going to go ahead and compile this. See if that is just a quirk. And see what happens here. So that succeeded. Try one more time. There it is. So I don't know what that was. Just compiling made it go away because it wasn't really making much sense. All right. And if we look at the view controller for this, let's see, we have our table view code. We can go ahead and start bringing in some of the more dynamic code. So let's see, number of rows in section. We can do categories, count. All right, so we should get 4 rows. We can go ahead and try to load this. Actually, I'm going to put a breakpoint right here. We'll see what happens to that. We just want to make sure that this is going to load up. All right, so there's our breakpoint. And I'm going to just step over because we should go into this now. If we do a PO print object on that, we should get a 0. We do. So no errors accessing that categories variable. All right, load categories. And now if we try it again, 4, great. Then we should go into this right here, into our table view code, and let's see how many rows we get. So we do get 4. Now we know we are loading from our data model. So let's try that one more time and see if this is going to work right. Remember, the data model, core data, is going to persist that data, so it's going to be loaded back whenever we call get data. This variable is going to have that data, and we shouldn't go into this conditional. So that's what we're looking for now. All right, so here's the conditional. Let's see, what do we have? We have 4. So we're going to skip over this, load it, and we have 4 here. Excellent. So next we're going to continue loading this data for our other entities that we have and keep moving forward with building out the UI, and then we'll eventually get into building out our quiz detail scene.